Welcome to the Probate Nation. I'm Richard Ruddy. You know, Virginia probate is like a trip on a slow-moving steam engine train, and during that journey, you undertake to deal with the various assets of the decedent. And one of the more challenging set of assets you may be asked to deal with are stamps, as well as coins and other collections such as baseball cards, Pokemon cards, Hummels, and signed memorabilia, and I could go on and on. Our show today focuses on how to deal with all of these collectibles, and we are delighted to have as our guest an experienced consultant who is often asked to render valuations and an opinion as to the value of many of these items. He will share his insights along with a host of other suggestions he encourages you to keep in mind when dealing with stamps and other collectibles. So let's get started by letting me tell you a little bit about our guest. He graduated from Washington College of Law, American University here in Washington, D.C., and his day job is as an in-house counsel for a Virginia-based government contractor. But his passion and avocation is stamp collecting, which he started in the 1960s. And his avocation continues to this day as an appraiser, buyer, and seller of stamp collections and other collectibles. He assists executors and heirs with the assessment of and disposition of their various collections as well. And he is well regarded in the Metro DC community as a go-to guy when dealing with stamps. He's a member of the American Philatelic Society, which is the largest nonprofit stamp collecting foundation of philatry in the world. Glenn, please welcome Glenn Nozick. Before we jump into the program, Glenn, I want to say I was surprised to hear about the wide variety of items that folks collect. I mean, it's just staggering to me. Can you tell me a little bit more about the sort of breadth of things you see people collecting?
Sure, Richard. You wouldn't believe it. First of all, thank you very much for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here. It's unbelievable the things that people collect. If you think back to your childhood, we all collected matchbook covers, stamps, coins, baseball cards, rocks, seashells. It's pretty limitless, the variety of things that people collect.
Well, that's really, and I know we're going to talk about a lot of more narrowly collectible items, but I know you mentioned people collect barbed wire and all that crazy kind of stuff as well. So, but anyway, let's go ahead and get into our program here, and just tell me a little bit about what are the common collectibles you come across in your work?
So when I'm contacted, generally, Richard, it's associating with coins and stamps because that's what I do most of. But generally, when I go to a house where there's a collection of some sort, you'll find there's a variety of other collections, some of which I have tangential experience with. Others I know enough to be able to advise the owners that they should get it checked out. Most commonly, I see stamps, I see coins, I see a lot of space memorabilia and aircraft memorabilia. That's the main stuff that people collect today: stamps, coins, baseball cards, somewhat, but less.
So, do the popularity and I guess the value of these various collectibles change over time?
Oh, absolutely. Collectibles, probably more than almost anything else, is a supply and demand issue. When you have a rare item that many people want, the price is very high. When you have a great supply of things that people don't necessarily want as much, the price is lower. Over time, as fewer and fewer collectors enter the market, it means that the general value of things is declining because there are fewer people competing for the same universe of items.
You know, again, it's kind of interesting. When we were preparing for this show, we were talking. You told me the story about some Yankee ticket stubs that you had collected or acquired just by chance with a bunch of other stuff way back when, and didn't pay much attention to it until later date, and then you started to find out that maybe these things might have some value. Tell me a little bit about why those ticket stubs, and this is important, why they became valuable. Tell me a little bit about that.
So I have to start by saying, Richard, it really shows how you just never know what you're going to find in somebody's attic or basement. This was an older woman whose husband had collected, and she was downsizing and moving abroad and wanted to sell the stamp collection. So I went over there, and it was a adequate little stamp collection, but there was also some baseball memorabilia. There was ostensibly a an autograph of Babe Ruth, but I quickly saw that that was not real. Um, but I bought the collection and I took it home and I worked with the stamps and a bunch of the ancillary material I just threw into a drawer. A few years later, I was bored, had nothing to work on for my stamp collection, so I took out these ticket stubs, and it turns out it was a rubber band pack of ticket stubs from the 1930s, I think maybe, of Yankee baseball games. And I took four of them at random and scanned them and put them on eBay. And all of a sudden, everything started exploding. A half a dozen bidders were going crazy over these things, and I couldn't understand it. So I texted one of the bidders and asked, and he was a very nice guy. He said he collects them with his son, but he explained to me that there's this whole, underworld group of collectors who collect ticket stubs from games where Babe Ruth hit a home run.
Oh my
And
goodness.
that's what these were. They were ticket stubs from games that Babe Ruth had hit a home run. And I guess one
Oh
of them
my
was extremely
gosh.
valuable. One, I mean, ugly, dirty little pieces of paper. But I must say, my wife likes to joke with me about my passion being little, dirty, used pieces of paper. I guess it's the same thing for the ticket stubs, but they turned out to be quite valuable. So never assume that something doesn't have value.
Well, that's very interesting. Now, do you find that the collectors of these various items are of a certain age these days?
I'm finding that fewer and fewer kids are interested in collecting anything. When my kids were young, I tried to get them involved in stamps. My younger son was a big soccer player, so we started collecting soccer on stamps. My older was a big reader, so we collect books on stamps, but they very quickly lost interest. Um, Kids collect Pokemon cards, stuff like this, but I'm finding that less and less are people collecting things. The younger generation is looking much more to a more streamlined existence, I guess. Folks my age, your age, Richard, we collected everything and still do. I still have books, I have coins, I have stamps, I have a panoply of things that I'm sure my wife would like me to get rid of. But I find very few people coming into the hobby world these days.
Now, you told me when we were preparing for the show that you got interested in collecting because you found your uncle's album. And I'm going to post up on the screen here one of the stamps that you share with me. Tell me a little bit about that.
So I'm fooling around in the basement of our family house, doing, of course, something I shouldn't have been doing, which is going through boxes that were in the basement. And I found my uncle's stamp book. He used to collect when he was a kid, and something this is going to sound very strange, I know, but something about the smell of musty paper just hit me. And then I opened it up, and there are all these really, really neat things in there. There's triangle stamps and airplanes and animals. And the one that hit me the most was a stamp of, I think it was from South Africa. And that was the stamp that got me interested in stamp collecting because I just thought it was so exotic. And I might say that years later down the road, Richard, I ended up when I was 20 hitchhiking through Europe and then going overland across Asia because I wanted to see the Taj Mahal. And that was in large part because of my stamp collecting. So parents, don't let your kids collect stamps if you don't want them to travel.
So let's talk about what can be done with the collection. So a collection is identified in the course of probating an estate. What can typically be done with that collection?
So interestingly, collections don't often transcend generations. My parents collected Yadro figurines. I haven't the slightest interest. And it's the same. Very often, I work a lot with the estate dealers in the area, with auction galleries and estate dealers, and Generally, the folks who inherit stamp collections aren't interested. Sometimes I want to hold on to it out of sentimentality. It's something that dad collected, it's something my husband collected. But generally, there's very little interest in actually continuing the collection itself.
So we get a collection. I'm the executor of an estate.
Mhm.
Should I get it formally appraised?
So, this is the lawyer in me coming out, Richard. It depends. Um,
Thanks a
it really
bunch.
depends. So when I get a call from an estate attorney or from an estate dealer or from anybody about stamps or coins, my first question is always, is it a book? Is it a book, a box, or a room? Just trying to calibrate a little bit the volume of material we're talking about, how much time it'll take. And then I'll ask some questions about how did the person collect? Did they go to the post office religiously and get plate blocks? Did they send away for first day covers? Did they work with dealers? Did they buy from auction? All of that will help calibrate my understanding of the type of collector and therefore the type of collection to enable me to answer the question whether it needs a formal appraisal. Now, as we all know, listening to this, for probate, sometimes you need an appraisal, whether it's worth it or not. But I can get a better sense as to whether I'm talking about a 1 hour global analysis of a collection versus a very sophisticated collection that might take a lot of time and entail going through stamp by stamp or set by set.
Now, assuming that the collection should be appraised based upon your assessment and the needs of the estate, should the collection be organized in some fashion in advance before you come out for the visit? Should someone start to catalog stuff for you in some way, or what are your suggestions to folks typically?
So what I always tell people is don't touch anything. Stamps and even coins, baseball cards, all collectibles to some degree are fragile. And a layperson who doesn't know the nuances could actually really badly damage something merely by touching it. Let me give you an example. Stamps. Condition is everything these days. Again, going back to the discussion about supply and demand. When there's only very few of when there's a lot of something and very few buyers, the condition becomes very important. And with a stamp, there are so many things that can go wrong. A blunted perforation. The perforations are the little ridges around the edge that allow you to separate the stamps. A fingerprint on the gum on the back can reduce the value by over half. So, short answer is I always tell people don't do anything. Leave it exactly where it is. Leave it in the condition where it is. Don't try to organize it. I'll take care of that when I get there.
So
And let's say,
as we continue the discussion about appraisals, do's and don'ts, you know, has any particular collectibles that you've seen kept their value over the years?
so in virtually every class of collectible category, whether it be fine art, stamps, coins, the high end has kept its value. In other words, the elite 5% or 10% of items have kept their value. Um, Pretty much everyone, for example, has heard about what we in the philatelic trade call the inverted Jenny, what layperson calls the upside down airplane stamp. Um, Things like that, they keep their value because they're known in the community. But the tenor of collecting, the way things are collected, the way things are sold, has changed dramatically over the last 10 years, with the plummeting in interest.
So I know you sent me a couple other stamps, so I'm going to ask them to post up on the screen this one we talked about. Apparently it's from the 1800s. Somebody filled out an envelope and kind of hand wrote on the envelope and then made all kind of sketchings. Can you tell me a little bit about, I mean, this seems to be unique, but maybe that's what they did back then.
Yeah, no, it was very, very cool when I found this envelope. So when I said high-end material keeps its value, unique material keeps its value as well, things that are unusual or interesting. So the envelope that you guys are going to put up on the screen there, it's basically from 1861, 1862, and it's a pretty common stamp on the envelope. But what the sender did was take a pen, and of course we're talking about with an inkwell, and draw all these little drawings of quotidian life, day-to-day life, pictures of churning butter and feeding the cows and et cetera, et cetera.
But that's very, I thought it was very, very cool. So the other one that I thought was very interesting was you sent me, looks like a copy of a stamp with the postmark on it from 1962 with a signature by the astronaut John Glenn. Tell me a little bit
Yes.
about this stamp. How did you come across this one?
So this was actually a birthday present. I think I was, let's see, 7 or 8 years old. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Now you know how old I am. But because my name is Glenn and I was very into the whole space program, my parents got this. It's a first day cover. Now, a first day cover, what that means is it's the first day that a stamp was issued. For every stamp that's issued, the post office will have a little ceremony and issue what's formally called a first day cover, which is the cancellation on the stamp that ties the stamp to the cover, as we say. It attaches the stamp to the cover, shows the date that the stamp was issued. And on this one, my dad used to work for General Electric, and he, at some function, met John Glenn and had John Glenn, the astronaut, autograph this for me. And I have it today. I still have it today. It's something I'll obviously never get rid of.
Of course, that's very, very, very cool. Very, very cool. Well, look, I mean, I'm probating an estate. I'm the executor. I have these various things. You've come out and taken a look at these things and given me a sense of value. In some cases, maybe I've gotten a formal appraisal. If I need to sell these things, what are my options?
So let me back up just a little bit from before the selling. So I think the question is, what do I do with it? And it goes a little bit beyond just how do I sell it. Some people, as I mentioned earlier, Richard, want to keep things because of sentimentality, or they think it's going to get more valuable with time. That's not going to happen. It's not going to get more valuable. What I generally suggest to people is it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. There can be a hybrid. Let me back up. Your options, what to do with an inherited stamp collection. So you can keep it. You can donate it to a charitable organization. You can sell it to a collector. You can sell it to a dealer. You can put it up at auction. Those are pretty much the options available. And I can, if you'd like, I can just give a very brief pros and cons of each.
Could you please? I'd appreciate that.
Okay. So when people want to keep a collection because of the sentimentality, what I'll generally what I'll tell them depends on value. If it's a casual collector collection, fine, keep it. No harm done. Give it to a kid. If it's a valuable collection, I will explain to people, look, this has value today. If you sell it today, you might be able to get X amount for it. As time goes on, that value is going to decline, not increase. So if the money is important, my advice is always sell it sooner rather than later because of the declining market in collectibles. An alternative that I sometimes suggest is a hybrid, meaning if there's an area, I remember I saw one collection where they said the father really had a big collection, but really loved Pitcairn Island. So I suggested, why don't you keep the Pitcairn Island collection and sell the rest if that's a thing, and that way you can have your cake and eat it too. And that's in fact what they did. If you are going to sell, if you donate it, there are a number of organizations. I donate a lot of stuff to MVets, for example, supporting veterans. But there's a wide variety of organizations you can donate to. If you're going to sell it, you can sell it to a collector. You'll probably get your best private sale value that way. However, if you don't know what you're doing, if the seller is somebody who inherited the collection, you're not going to have any guarantee that you're getting a fair price by selling it outright like that. Option two, you can sell it to a dealer. Dealers generally are members of the American Stamp Dealer Association. There is a code of ethics. That said, there are dealers who are more ethical than others, and as with every profession. What I generally tell people, if the collection has enough value to make it worthwhile, your best bet is to sell something at auction. And the reason for that is because when you sell it at auction, it will bring what the market says it's worth. So you can be sure that you're getting what it's actually worth today. So those are the basic choices for folks that want to get rid of a collection that they might have inherited.
So let me talk a little bit. So, as a seller, I need to be aware of what a purchaser might be looking for from me as I put something up for sale. So what kind of things would a purchaser be particularly attentive to as far as my authority to do something with this collection? And I need to prove that I have authority and own it, or what do you, because I'm trying to sell it, but I want to make sure I'm set up to go and don't run into a problem.
So interestingly, most of the time I'm getting calls from probate attorneys, so I'm pretty confident that the collection is owned by the estate. When I get calls from individuals wanting to sell collections or sell their father or brother's collection, I'll go look at it. And in talking to the people and seeing how it's set up in the house, I can generally get a pretty good sense as to whether the collection is legit or not and belongs to the seller. More important, I think, for your listeners is, as a seller, you're going to be less sophisticated than the buyer. Somebody is going out looking to buy a stamp collection, knows what they're looking for. You're not going to know. This is also why it's a good idea to work with an appraiser or even to put it up at auction, because then you don't have to rely on your expertise to determine whether or not you're getting a fair price for something.
Sure, that's a good advice. Well, we are running towards the end of our time today, and I wanted to give you a chance to kind of share some final thoughts, some comments you might want to add, or any sort of lessons you want to share. We have about a minute or so that we can allow you to do that, and I give you the floor, sir.
Sure. Thank you very much. First of all, this has been a lot of fun, and I hope helpful. My advice would be this: if you have valuable collectibles, and you don't intend on keeping them as family heirlooms, I would do something sooner rather than later. I've been watching this for the last 40 years. The stamp market peaked in the 1980s. There was a tremendous plunge after that. It's been coming back. But when I go to a stamp show, I'm 68 years old and I'm the youngest guy there, Richard. They call me the kid, which I love. But my point is, going back to our initial statement, supply and demand, there are fewer and fewer people interested, and I've seen the prices really go down in stamps. Coins have kept their value a little bit better because of the intrinsic value of the metal. Gold and the silver, of course, retain their value. Stamps, not so much. But if it's something that you enjoy and it's something that you like to do with your kids, this is something I did with my dad, and it was great fun, and I learned so much about history and natural history. It was a great way to do it. My advice would be get involved in stamp collecting, but if not, and you inherit a collection, I would suggest you divest sooner rather than later.
Well, Glenn, thanks so very much. This has been very, very valuable. I appreciate you sharing both your personal experiences as well as your expertise with our viewers in the Probate Nation. It's going to be a great help to folks as these things get handed down as the generations pass along. So
great. Thanks, Richard.
Stamps, coins, and other collectibles are something we see regularly in probates. But as we know, the quality and the value of a collectible is ultimately established in the marketplace. Absent some specialized knowledge, most folks will not be able to determine if what they have in front of them is actually valuable or not. Given your fiduciary duties as a administrator or executive in the state, we encourage you to reach out to a professional that has that specialized knowledge. both as to the quality and potential value of the item in front of you. And if you need to sell it, they will have the knowledge and contacts as to how best to sell it for a fair price. Friends, I hope you found the show tonight helpful. Replays of the Probate Nation shows can be viewed on the Probate Nation YouTube channel. And if you'd like monthly tips on suggestions on probate matters, please sign up for the free monthly Probate Nation newsletter. We are out of time, folks. Thanks for visiting with us. And until the Probate Nation meets again, make good choices and be safe out there.